I would ask the board to approve and authorize me to sign it. I thought I would provide a little bit of background, if that makes
Please.
sense.
Yes.
So in December of 2012, town meeting by majority vote approved the creation of the Tax Increment Financing Plan for TripAdvisor. And I would note that it was amended in May of 2013, because of changes to the size of the building, which, and that agreement was approved by unanimous vote of town meeting. So the tax increment financing is an increment. It's the tax exemption that's provided to an entity that's determined to be of a significant value to bring into the community for economic development. The increment is only provided to the amount that's above the tax that was in place at the time. So it's an increment. The tax increment finance deal that we're talking about from TripAdvisor is a 13-year agreement. There was 76% exemption for 5 years and a 1% exemption for 8. So we're in that 1% realm now. About a year ago, TripAdvisor informed us that they did not meet the required 700 jobs that they needed to create or relocate to Needham as part of their agreement. This is the job creation is a state portion of the mandate that is included in our TIF agreement. And they knew at the time that they were not going to be able to meet the December 31, 2021 700 job target either. We don't have that report yet, but they had told us that they weren't going to make it. So my intent in creating this forbearance agreement, working with TripAdvisor and Town Council, was to create a record of that noncompliance so that the community had that record, and to determine whether there was an appropriate consideration for the town based on the fact that the jobs were not moved here or created here. We all know that the COVID-19 pandemic moved a lot of people's jobs a lot of places, and it wasn't even necessarily that they weren't at this location, it was that maybe not even in Massachusetts. I mean, and that was true for lots of industries. So just so it's clear, the 12/31/2020 report, in which there were not the 700 jobs, affects the FY22 tax levy, which is the year that we're in now. And so because there's a 1% exemption for TripAdvisor in 2022, their tax was exempted. The part it didn't pay was $17,543. And for the 12/30/21 report, which we don't have, but we know is not going to meet the target, the tax exemption for will be for 2023 at 18. I have these years backwards.
Okay.
17,543 for 21 and 18,000 for 18,776 for 2022. So again, those are the amounts that they were exempt from paying. They did pay the 99. They were billed and paying the 99%. And I just wanted to give you a sense that that for both 21 and 22, the real estate tax bill for TripAdvisor is in excess of $2.1 million. And so that's the amount that we did receive, as opposed to the 17,000 or 18,000 that we did not. In addition, TripAdvisor paid in 21 and 22 about 300,000, plus or minus 300,000 in personal property tax, and there's no exemption on the personal property tax. So the important statement here is that TripAdvisor was not released from any tax payment due to this forbearance agreement that we're recommending to you, and that they're full in compliance with the payment provisions of the TIF. Again, the 770 jobs that were not created or relocated to Needham, we negotiated with TripAdvisor that they would provide some benefit to the town. The most notable is a $25,000 contribution to the Needham Public Schools, and this is for scholarships for school-related travel. And this is something that they had done in the past, and it was very much appreciated by the schools because there are always students who have a hard time participating in those programs for financial reasons. There are a few other items that TripAdvisor agreed to do, including allowing us to host events at the TripAdvisor building, which we will be, I'm sure, hearing people request, and also speakers for training programs for staff. So, as you know, it's been suggested that the forbearance agreement should be brought to town meeting for a vote. I don't think it's necessary. Town Council has opined that the board's action is within its authority. We certainly could notify town meeting members if that's something the board wanted to do. But I know that many people are fully understanding of the forbearance agreement, but I think other people may have had the impression that there was a tax obligation that we had relieved TripAdvisor of, which again is not the case. and in my view, Mr. Chair, in recommending this, is that TripAdvisor is an important and valued institution here in Needham. It was founded here, and it was headquartered here, the world headquarters. It was an anchor of part of our redevelopment and other tech companies that are locating in Needham Crossing. We've been working closely with them to ensure that they remain a viable institution in town, and so I do recommend that the board approve and authorize me to sign the forbearance. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions? I know there was some discussion prior to our or during the first part of our meeting, citizens' comments on this issue. Discussion.
Well, I know, Mr. Chairman, and you're the chairman, so this is just my question.
Please.
The chairman of the Finance Committee has taken the time to sit here through the whole meeting for this. If he wants, I'd just as soon, although I'm not sure we're going to come to any agreement, if there's something else to be said, that he would have an opportunity to say it or ask it.
I appreciate it, but this is your meeting. I don't want to interrupt.
Okay. And I don't know, has the Finance Committee, Mr. Levy, taken a position on this? Or I know you came as a town meeting member, is that correct?
At the beginning, I did, to make my public comments. So the Finance Committee discussed questions that it had on March 9th. And I think there was a lot of uncertainty at that time, so we didn't really have anything ready to take a formal position. And that's why I don't have a financial position to.
That's okay. Thank you for that. I guess the way I look at this, and I understand the question, can you go before town meeting and have this ratified? I've received some emails on this. I bet people have here as well. And I think what got conflated was the amount, as we talk about the taxes due, and the benefits that we receive. So in one column, the taxes that are going to be due, that we're saying, you know, you don't have to pay your full amount of taxes. You have that 1% that you don't have to pay, the $17,000 and the $18,000. We're saying you still have to pay it. Okay, that there's no questions asked. On the other column, they're saying, you know what, we have this great agreement, but we cannot meet our obligations for, you know, employees coming to work. The travel business I thought was going to just go, and it did for a while, completely south, and I assume they laid a lot of people off and they weren't able to occupy this building, and there were some issues there. And so they're in violation of the agreement because that was one of the items for consideration. And correct me if I'm wrong here, Kate. So instead we say, okay, you can't meet that obligation, but let's start negotiating something and we'll allow that to happen. And what we did, you know, the $25,000 in scholarships to continue, the speakers and hosting events, I think, you know, on balance is something where we say that is a fair trade during this time of COVID. And of course, you will get back to where you need to be at the end of the day. I think with an agreement like this, I know with an agreement like this, we have the flexibility as a town to sign it. And I think there's a lot more predictability if we have that flexibility to sign it without having to go to town meeting and have them, you know, acknowledge it and ratify it. I think it would be bad precedent for us to do. I think if it did involve the financial agreement or arrangement that we originally had, I think that'd be completely valid. But because it involves these add-ins that are incredibly important and that the state actually mandated, I think we have the authority, since we have the authority to sign it, I think that we should sign it. And I think it gives predictability, and we can, you know, if people are interested in the summary of what we did, I'm happy to provide that. So that's where I'm at as far as that type of ratification. Mary Ann?
So I just want to clarify something that wasn't clear, I think, as you said it.
Sure.
TripAdvisor is paying $2.1 million annually in property taxes. The incentive that we gave them was the credit for the 17,543. So to some extent, you could almost look at the 17,543 and the 18,776, that by giving us these $25,000 contributions for Needham Public Schools, that those might in fact be considered an offset at this point, if we're looking at the whole package to the town. All right, but certainly I would say TripAdvisor is a valued community member. All of us understand why they did not have that number of employees working in that building in Needham during the pandemic. So that's certainly very true. But fundamentally, I would also say that I agree with you that the notion that you change governance because something's of interest or people would like to vote on it is not, I think, a good habit to undertake. I do think we should be, and we are, sitting here having a conversation fully about this in public. So certainly the public will understand what we've done in working with TripAdvisor, that we recognize that they could not have all their employees working in Needham, and they have continued to pay fully to the town their taxes that they owed, and we appreciate that. We appreciate them continuing as a member of our community, and I would support the town manager signing the forbearance agreement.
Thank you, Mary Ann. Further discussion, Kevin? Marcus. Yeah.
So listening to and kind of taking that all in, it all makes sense and agreement in which everybody's saying. So I don't have a hesitancy, but I would say in the case of maybe not going to town meeting, but informing them would be a good idea, but also having the FinCom. I know they don't have a position right now, but just understanding, if they had more dialogue and discussion and come to, I just go back to this being on the consent agenda like it was eventually, then we took it off after, we recognized or made aware that more discussion needed to be had for this. And I feel like in the essence of transparency, if we, depending on, when the next FinCom meeting is, the discussion or position that they're able to take, and I think would be just beneficial for us to kind of understand from their standpoint what exactly this would be for the town. But I understand that everything that has been said and the reason that we've done what we are doing makes sense, and that TripAdvisor is such a trusted partner within our town, and that all makes perfect sense. But I'm just trying to make sure that as being the government that we are, that we have a trusted voice, like FinCom, having that discussion and having a position doesn't even need to go to town meeting, but I think having their input on this wouldn't be a bad thing. But
Mary Ann?
Go ahead, Mary.
Well, and I guess I would say, from having watched the tape, it looks like FinCom, when they had the discussion, they did not have all the information. And I think that was unfortunate that evening, but, so I think they were concerned about a number of things that they made assumptions about that proved to be incorrect.
So for that meeting, now they have all the information, so
I
that's what
think
I'm...
they'll have another discussion with all the information, right?
Well, I think that, Finance Committee, as someone who sat as and was chair, right?
Right.
Yes.
And we can disagree maybe with this, but, it's the financial impact to the town, which, when we're looking at this, is not the issue.
It's not impacted.
Right.
Is not impacted. So it's really the conditions, and people might have input on it, but it's really up to this board to say, here's our position, town meeting gave us the authority, and, we have an agreement in front of us that I think needs to be executed for that reason. I bet Finance Committee might take it up maybe later and have a discussion on it, but I think it's not going to go to town meeting. I would prefer it not to go to town meeting, and for that reason, I think I want to vote on this and move forward. If there was, like I said, a financial impact or a position that, we were waiving the fees or saying they don't have to pay it, that would be a different discussion. Town meeting gave us the authority to sign this for a reason, and I think it gives us that flexibility to do so. But I'll be happy to listen to Dan.
Yeah, we have a volunteer government with hundreds of people that participated, and it's complicated. I mean, they're not a dozen contracts a year or hundreds of contracts a year. There are thousands of contracts a year. And we want people to be informed, but we've got a high-velocity business that has to operate with the staffing and bandwidth that's available to deal with it. So sometimes maybe information could have been gotten to some people in some ways in a little better form. This may be such a case. I mean, there's certainly people know that the TripAdvisor contract is a big contract for the town. But on the other hand, this particular waiver has to do with what is really a very small issue, and it's the kind of thing that makes sense for the select board to just deal with. Because in the context of all of that velocity and the work that has to get done, we have an obligation to have fair business relationships with companies that are based here in town, to try to resolve any issues that occur simply and fairly. And the basic analysis is that although the TripAdvisor contract is a big, complicated thing because it's attached to a big, complicated state program. The town's piece is very straightforward. In order to facilitate an attractive development that was good for the business and very good for the town waived a certain number of property tax payments, most of which has already gone out. We're down to the 1% per year level now, in exchange for getting a lot more money later, which we are also getting now. And although there is the problem about the COVID dislocations and the number of people working in the building at this time, and that could concern state agencies, and they could take action if they didn't feel TripAdvisor had done what it was supposed to do. But I don't believe that that's so. But that's on the state side of the equation. The town side of the equation is this business honoring the obligations that it made to the town about paying the prior property tax? And the answer is yes. So there is no adverse impact to the town, and the rest of it is really one of many different kinds of regulatory environments that don't directly impact the work of the town government. So it makes sense, in order to be fair to the business, in order to resolve these kinds of decisions in a reasonable and prompt way, rather than have it go around the town meeting cycle and eat up bandwidth of the people that had to do the preparations and work with the committees and everything else. If this can be solved at this level, it should be. I believe the answer to that question is yes. So I'm completely in favor of this. In terms of if there are members of the Finance Committee that are concerned about this, can we have further discussion? I have no problem about that. They have a right to know what we're doing, and it's not a secret. And hopefully they'll agree that it's our good judgment. But it is a decision that's properly vested here. So thank you.
Right, and I just want to clarify, thank you, Mark. I just want to clarify that this was put on the consent agenda. The chair sets the agenda. I didn't realize that this would be, something, and the questions did come from the Finance Committee, and great questions, and we did respond to the Finance Committee with those answers. So it's not like we're saying you need to talk to the Finance Committee. There were legitimate questions that we did answer, and I think at this point we're ready to vote it. Kevin.
Just to be clear, there is no tax issue here. Okay. It's only about the 770 jobs. Okay. I'm sympathetic to issues of clarity that were made by people in the public comment stuff. But I'm happy we didn't do this on the consent agenda. So I think this is the discussion, the clarity, and the openness we all want. And I'm happy to have the select board vote for it, so I would do it.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Kevin. Is there a motion that the board vote to approve and authorize the town manager to sign a forbearance agreement between the town and TripAdvisor? Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That's unanimous.